I think there's a few areas that I think about. Number one, in our mass scale infrastructure group, which are really building out next generation technology for web scale, for service providers, for public sector, optical backbones, et cetera. The 5 years of investments that we've made to actually bring those products to market in December, that's got a long life ahead of it, and I think they will be the backbones for the next generation, web scale providers as well as the carriers and 5G, et cetera. So that's exciting. I think the combination of the network automation, SD-WAN, and cloud security to give our customers this seamless capability to have their traffic flow in and out of clouds and SaaS providers, private clouds, et cetera, I think is going to be incredibly powerful. I think driving significant cloud automation across the entire networking portfolio over the next several years is going to continue to be important. There's some emerging technologies in areas like application networking. What we've done in the network is we've made it programmable, and a lot of the use cases and the early apps that we've seen there are really about operations of the infrastructure. I think we're going to enter an era where the app developer is going to have the ability to actually influence and provision whatever underlying infrastructure they need, and abstracting some of the complexity of how networking works and exposing that at a service layer for the applications in sort of an application networking model is something that we're beginning to work on now. I think multi-factor continuous authentication is something that's an area that our teams are working on, where you authenticate once.
Right.
In many environments, you want to have this continuous authentication based on things that you know about the individual. So that's interesting work that's going on. I think looking at security at the workload level is also something else that we can add value to. In the collaboration space, I think continuing to evolve these platforms to be a little more feature rich for specific industry use cases is something else that our teams are going to be focused on. And so there's on and on and on and on and on of things that we can be working on, and it's exciting.
Very focused on winning the developer, and I'm sure you'll talk a lot with Pat about this. And obviously, what we're doing with an enterprise-grade Kubernetes platform is super important for us. The edge strategy is super important for us. We're certainly embracing as a service and consumption, and security is a very, very big topic. Security has to be built in and intrinsic. And then finally, I'd say there's a vast opportunity in software defining the network, and we're off to a great start there, but there's a long way to go, and we keep building more and more elements into that strategy, both organically and with acquisitions. A lot of them inside VMware, and Dell Technologies, we've done several hundred acquisitions in the last 5 years, and so it's organic and inorganic innovation, plus of course partnerships play a super important role in our ultimate ability to deliver the best solutions in the industry.
And a couple of things that are going on that I am really excited about. One is you touch on the security landscape. And before I'm in the board meeting getting approval for the Carbon Black acquisition, I said, it's the last thing I do in my career. I'm going to fix the security industry. And one of the board members looked at me and he says, that might be the last thing that you do in your career.
Hopefully that wasn't Michael Dow.
But, it's a broken industry and it needs to be transformed. And we want to be a force that transforms it. And I'm excited about the fact this ability to, we'll soon be launching Carbon Black in vSphere, an agentless ability to be managing, and securing VMs and containers. Wow, that's pretty interesting. Being able to connect that up to the network and application behavior, right? Oh, that's pretty interesting. As we build Carbon Black into NSX, we build it into Workspace ONE, because we truly said, hey, we are out to displace take your list. I mean, we're out to displace, traditional firewall vendors, load balancer vendors, traditional endpoint AV. There's a rotting dead carcass that needs to go, right? The ability to integrate this from an end-to-end analytics perspective, leveraging some of the AI techniques that we, just acquire Nyansa, and bringing those into that core platform. So that's one that we are out on, I'll say, a noble mission, right? For the industry, that I think is pretty powerful. So quite excited about that. I think this whole space, companies went from having 100 campuses to 10,000 campuses overnight.
Sure.
Right. And the implications of that for employee productivity, connectivity, security, big deal. Obviously, that gives us, leveraging Workspace ONE and what we're doing for end user, what we're doing in the intrinsic security, as I just discussed, but also the whole position of VeloCloud, SD-WAN, right? I'm really just saying, boom, I'm remotely, right? And I get management, I get security, I get quality of service wherever I am. Wow, that's pretty exciting, right? As you say, this distributed enterprise occurs. So that's one we're excited about. I'm also, last year we talked about Project Magna, right, which is bringing AI into the automation of the infrastructure itself. And we're now getting some very impressive results where literally, and this is a vSAN example, but we have the self-optimizing Magna engine optimizing for the running workload in the vSAN array, right? And you're sort of like, oh, right? How big should those block sizes be? Should we be buffering more or less, right? Should we be optimizing for read or write latency? All this, I'll say this, black art of storage.
The
right?
knobs and dials we're used to dealing with.
Yeah, we're now doing that with AI. And we're getting fabulous results. We're going to say, we're just going to turn us on and we'll do it for you, right? My dream would be that, first we call you instead of you calling us, right? We're saying, hey, here's the 5 next things that are going to break. And then instead of us calling you, we're going to say, here's the 4 of the 5 that we just fixed on your behalf over the weekend, right? We patched them, upgraded them, we did all that operations for you, right? And here's the one we can't do, right?
We need your help.
Yeah, we need your help on. Somebody needs to go in the data center and flip the switch. And it enables our customers, and this is where the Tanzu story to me becomes so powerful, because every day that you're spending looking down the stack, as opposed to looking up at applications and business, that's what we want to enable, that we allow our customers resource to spend more time looking up at applications and more time up at the business value that they can deliver.
The conflict between price and performance, again, was very deeply rooted in shared nothing architecture, where every node came with a certain amount of performance and a certain amount of capacity. And that capacity cost more if you wanted it to perform better. Once we disaggregated those two and allowed us to use the lowest cost flash available, we're basically breaking that trade-off. And so breaking all of these trade-offs, what does it mean for the customer? It means that they don't need to think about it anymore. They don't need to choose between high scale or high resilience. They don't need to choose between low cost and high performance. And so the first thing they gain out of it is they don't need to think about storage anymore. It just works. And then the second thing that they realize, usually a few months after they start using the system, is that they can start doing things that they couldn't do before. They can start analyzing not just a small subset of their data, but the entirety of their data set. And they can do it not in a batch process overnight, but in real time. And they can have 100 different teams, whether it's in the financial space where it's quant teams, or in the life science space where it's researchers. They can have all of these teams work on the exact same data set without stepping on each other's toes, because of the way we do workload isolation, and because each of those teams can get their own nodes that aren't interacting with the other team's nodes.
I think another kind of big related opportunity that we see is in 5G. And the reason is that all networks are becoming software defined. And as NFV, which is sort of the software defined version of the telco network, as that gets rolled out, basically all of those telco workloads are moving on to the kinds of infrastructure that we know how to build and build more of than anyone in the world. And so together, across Dell Technologies, we're creating a platform to make 5G more accessible, more real, and at lower cost. And that's super exciting, obviously, because that is a big enabling element, right, to make everything intelligent and sort of thrust us faster into this fourth industrial revolution.
If I sort of think about the journey to cloud as one to increasing ephemerality, first I could deploy an app inside an app server inside of a VM on that runtime platform. And then ultimately, maybe that became containers and that gets deployed to Kubernetes. Well, the next thing is probably serverless. So there'll be some applications that are serverless, and that's not going to be Kubernetes. That's going to be a different kind of a runtime platform. And then actually, maybe the fourth type of application is an edge type application. Like maybe it's going to be deployed on my Comcast box or my Uber car or whatever it is. So I actually think there's not standardization at that layer. And I think Kubernetes is one of the things in our view that is really, really important, but it's one of the things that's really, really important. I think that's a slightly different view than maybe some of the other vendors in the market who say, no, the whole world's going to re-platform onto Kubernetes the same way it did on vSphere. And I just say, to me, it's a runtime layer thing. It's not an infrastructure thing. So therefore, for us, supporting Kubernetes is a critical P0 thing because it's the application platform for many new applications. But it's no less important to us than serverless, and it's no less important to us than edge, and it's no less important to us than being able to have a common networking experience with your VM as well. So I think maybe that's a different view from maybe others in the market who we're fundamentally betting on heterogeneity, not standardization.
And do you see something, to your earlier point, on the journey that you're excited about or you're looking out at for that edge use case? Or others beyond Kubernetes right now?
Yeah, it's funny when you look at the market signals. I think we're all struggling a bit, truthfully, to parse the market signals now that we're all remote because we don't have the same in-person interaction the way we used to, sort of the serendipitous conversations. So I guess what we see, I think you see the cloud providers hyper interested in serverless. Why? Because it's kind of the perfect thing for them. It's highly ephemeral, massive scale. It's the best mapping of cost of compute to application consumption that they can provide. And that's ultimately what they want to do. So I think the cloud providers are keenly interested in serverless. And you see a lot of work from Amazon in particular, who are pushing this agenda hard. So I think that one's interesting to me. I think you think about the problem domain that serverless introduces, it's actually even more profound than what Kubernetes introduces. So like when people start using Kubernetes, what you now have is a highly ephemeral application platform that comes and goes. And so immediately people recognize, oh my goodness, I have a security problem. Like, can this pod talk to this pod? I don't know, what's its identity? So it forces you to adopt something like Vault out of the gate.
Right.
It also introduces a networking problem. Is how do I connect this thing to this thing when they have different IP addresses that come and go all the time? It's actually a really hard problem. So it forces you to adopt something like Consul to basically do the networking between. So I think we're super excited by the fact that like Kubernetes introduces a lot of the problems that Terraform Vault and Consul solve. But serverless does actually to even more extreme case. It's like, well, this thread spins up. Can it talk to this thing? I don't know. It requires you to use identity-based security and service-based networking because these things move around all the time.
Right.
So I think we're super excited about serverless as a thing because it sort of reinforces the problem domain of cloud and makes Terraform Vault and Consul even more applicable. But I think what we're now seeing is edge, which is just super surprising to me when you start to see how many of our customers are deploying applications on on the edge. I think there are basically two categories to edge. There's like store endpoints, stores, Like, hey, I'm Walmart. I need to be able to deploy applications to the edge. Well, that's probably running on a 2 CPU machine, like a tiny thing at the edge. But then there's the IoT use case, which is like my light bulb. To me, that's actually equally applicable for what we do as the cloud use case, because when this thing at the edge spins up, it's highly ephemeral, comes and goes. So can it upload its data to this thing over here? I don't know. What's its identity?
Right.
How does it connect to it? I don't know. What's its service name, and how do we do service-based networking? So I think actually the big paradigm shift is like infrastructure inside your data center to infrastructure outside your data center. And this is cloud and edge are part of the same market. And I think we're seeing signs, no question, that people are deploying our products at scale on the edge.
Yeah, and I think, all of these layers of abstraction are ultimately, while they're removing some number of problems, abstracting us from them, they're introducing others at the end of the day that we will constantly be challenged with.
I think Kubernetes is the perfect case of that. It's like when I was running an app server, I knew where it was. It was like, it's on that IP address behind that load balancer, and I can deploy an application artifact to it. And great, that's the basis of security. Now that's the basis of networking. You introduce Kubernetes, and now you've got this highly ephemeral thing that's coming and going. It actually breaks everything related to networking and security, and it forces you to actually make this paradigm shift.
Episodes of the Looking Ahead podcast with Eric Kaplan are available on thinkahead.com and your favorite podcast platforms.